Well, great to meet you, Will. My name is Shane. I'm coming at you from Australia. Have you ever been down under?
I have never been down under. I have quite a lot of friends that are out in Australia. Quite a few working in TV and film and things like that. But yeah, I've
Yeah.
never been myself personally.
As I always say, there's a lot of productions and projects down here, so it might be worth looking into. You never know, right?
Well, I had a friend who worked for quite a few years on Neighbours, which was always a little bit of a dream of his when he was when we were at university together. So,
Yeah.
I think he did the Neighbours versus Zombies things from quite a few years ago now.
Well, Neighbours is actually quite bigger in Europe than it is down under these days. Australia still watch it, but it's much more popular overseas.
Yeah, I think he said it's over here, it's a program for teenagers. Over there, it's a program for much older people, which means that they're watching programs about teenagers.
I know we're off the subject here, but yeah, it's a program for senior citizens mostly down here, and a few young kids too, I guess. Your movie, The Group. Thank you for letting me watch it. I think it's a privilege because I was brought through so many different emotions while watching it. It's a short film, but I think I was going up and down in heart rate at various times. Did you come up with a concept yourself? Did you base it on any true stories, or what? How did you come up with this story?
Yeah, so the group came from experiences that I'd had with family members and friends in support groups. And I'd always kind of had in the back of my mind that they were interesting places in terms of drama because
Yeah,
you've got lots of like competing voices, you've got a lot of different personalities, and generally they're all in a room from all walks of life. And the only reason they're there is because of addiction. And
yeah.
that's generally the only thing they have in common. And I thought, like this is quite a nice contained setting for a kind of drama. And then quite a few years later, when I was thinking about making my first feature film, I was looking for locations that could almost like be story engines that could generate like self-contained single location film. And I kept coming back to this sort of group. And I thought to myself, I was like, well, yeah, but wouldn't it be good to sort of take something that's quite a high stakes, emotional situation and then just kick it up a notch. And that was
Yeah.
kind of where the idea for the film came from. And then everything just sort of snowballed from there, really.
It's kind of a revenge story of a different kind, and the mysterious group that you've gathered together, you can't tell who's who. They have different traits and personalities. So well done in the writing to keep things interesting.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, the idea is that we kind of wanted, from the revenge aspect, there is, without getting into spoilers, there is another version of this film which is almost like Taken or something. We're almost on the other side of that. And that's reflected. We did a few kind of things during the making of the film where I collaborated quite a lot with Dennis, the composer, where we had these like
Yeah,
little hero themes, like almost like little Western themes creeping in, which was to kind of enhance that kind of Western symbolism that Jack, the antagonist, in
yeah,
his mind, he believes that he is the hero. Really, he doesn't kind of see. He feels like he's taking righteous retribution against these people.
yeah,
I mean, in terms of writing it, like I knew that I needed different personalities. I knew that I needed a set number of characters to keep the drama going. And it was him really that drove all of that. Because as soon as I had those characters set up after, I think probably after the first 10, 15 minutes when we really hit the ground running, like a lot of the drama comes from their like personal grievances and things like that. And then as soon as he comes in, it's this just climbing rate of tension that we were really aiming for, like almost like a kettle boiling that just goes up and up and up and up and up.
yeah. It's a
And it
boiling
was
point.
really, yeah, it was really Dylan as Jack that kind of really drove all of that.
It's interesting you say that you had like another whole version or maybe a backstory in mind. And we can go spoilers because I want to talk about Angelina Burton in particular because
Mm.
the ending with her is quite extraordinary. Her acting, I don't know, I've never seen her before, but she's one to watch, definitely. But it's an isolated situation. Before I get there, it's an isolated situation. So straight away, to me, the drama is intense because they're in a small space, there's different personalities, there's clashes, and then an antagonist comes in, upsetting the apple cart even more.
Yeah, it sort of takes, the idea was that it takes like a safe space and turns it into an unsafe space. And all the things that you can say in a group situation, you can do in a situation, that kind of openness suddenly becomes a weapon against you. And we were looking for this kind of like, one of the things early on that we quite liked, it's like a whodunit by people who don't know what they've done. They, you know, Angelina has, Cara, played by Evangelina, she's wronged quite a lot of people. I think she says at one point, like, you know, she's like, did I steal from you? Did I like cheat on you? What did I do? And it could be any one of those things. They could be any number of people. And it's just sort of, which one are you almost? And which one is the group affected by? Now, talking about the ending, because she is absolutely fantastic in the ending. So that ending was not the ending till about a day and a half before the shoot. Because this is
that right? A day and a half.
Wow. This was a very low budget film, like very, very low. And we had a location that was in a community center, real community center, where we knew we could get all the environments. So you had the roof, you had the car park, you had the main hall. And what we found is that they had booked in, I think, like a Zumba class on one of the days. And we were trying to explain the mechanics of filmmaking to them. We've been like, well, I mean, you booked with us first, so we should take priority. And they were like, the Zumba class there. So the Zumba class went ahead, and we effectively lost an entire day of what was at that time a 10-day shoot. Right. And we turned up for the shoot day, and we were like, we've lost a day. At that point, we were already so behind that it was kind of one take. It was, is the performance good? Yes. Is it in focus? Yes. Okay, moving on. That's the stage we were at. That was really towards the back end of the shoot, because we were shooting more or less in order. And I remember that Dylan, who plays Jack, and Lee Dovey, my first assistant director and a friend of mine for a long time, were sat in the pub doing what are we going to do? And at that point, we were like, well, we could lose. I mean, there was whole sequences. There was a whole sequence with Henry and his wife. Which was partially shot. It was meant to go on for another 15 minutes. It was a sort of 90-page script. And we kind of worked out, we're like, well, if we just end it, we can cap it off here. What's the emotional journey? And that is when, and obviously spoilers, jump to whatever time code for this one. Dylan said to me, what if Jack wins? And what does that mean? And we were like, okay, we can work with that. Okay. And then Lee, my first assistant director, said to me, Good Will Hunting, which was it's not your fault, it's not your fault, it's not your fault. Just that repetition of the word. And we were like, it can be a victory for Jack that's quite empty, but also in some way, you have these two people that want to bring the blame on themselves, that they want what they believe justice is to be meted out, who is at fault. And that is really what this is about. And the truth is, no one's really at fault. It's very messy. There's a perception where Jack is at fault. There is a perception where you could say they're at fault.
Yeah.
And the thing is about Jack is that throughout the film, he's looking for easy answers. He's looking for people to be monsters when they're not. He's looking for someone to be guilty when they're not. And as a result, we just came to that moment. And when we were playing out the scene and Jack walked away, Evangelina was down on her knees and we were sort of pulling back with the camera. And then she sort of starts doing that thing where she sort of like, it's almost like an animalistic thing, just the scream, the cry, and just sort of starts like nuzzling Seth's legs. And I was like, yeah, that's it. It's like a wounded animal. And then that was just it. And then cut to black. And that it felt very true. It felt true in a way that the previous ending did not. It felt very true to the spirit of it. And I glad that it happened. It was one of those sort of fortuitous events. I think if we had gone with what we originally had planned, it wouldn't have worked as well. You didn't really have those moments. It was very much more straightforward. Jack died, you know, everybody had like a little knight's tied up bow. Who else did? I think no. I think everybody. I think everybody survived. Everybody survived apart from the people who die in the film. So yeah,
Okay.
it was quite. It's quite an interesting one, really. And it was with a day of with almost that lack of time. That day to work with, it sort of focuses your like intent down. You're like, what is it? It's this. Okay, what's the most direct point to get there? This is the way forward, which is, I think, kind of where it gets its power from. Just almost an uncluttered, an uncluttered way of thinking that only like the desperate can come up with.
Look, I don't know if I was supposed to. I know it's redemption, but I don't know if I was supposed to feel sorry for Jack. I didn't. I got to say, I felt more sorry for the people in the circle. In the end, yeah, that's how I felt, and I know it keeps you thinking long after the credits go, which is a testament to the film. But was I supposed to like Jack? Because I didn't.
No, no.
Yeah,
In Jack's mind, he like I mentioned earlier, he's the hero of his own story,
yeah,
and
yeah,
there is again a film where he is that hero, and we kind of look at it uncritically. But the
yeah.
thing is, he's not the hero, and he spends an entire film trying to convince himself that everything he's doing is righteous and how much power he has. And then, as soon as he gets what he wants, it's like, oh, okay, that's just it. That's nothing. Nothing has changed except you're a worse person for it. And there was a big discussion about what he did after that, like what happened to him. Like it's almost like he retreats to some kind of like empty, sad life. There's just nothing there, like a shark that sort of stops moving. We were never like, he would never have killed himself or anything like that, but he would have
Yeah.
just stopped, and that was all he had left to give, just going through the motions. But no, I think to have sympathy, if you say, I really empathize with what he was going through, because ultimately he victimized his own daughter as well and couldn't see
Yeah.
himself as part of that problem. What he was almost emblematic with is when during support groups, addiction support groups, the way we were viewing it was the kind of a transformative process. You are sick, you go in, and through the process of like sharing and taking responsibility, you come out of the other end a changed person. And although you may ask for forgiveness, you may not necessarily get it, but it's almost not about that. There's an unburdening of your sins to a point, and you have to learn to accept what's happened and move on. And for Jack, there was a whole thing of, I can't accept that you can get over it. I can't accept that you can move on because I cannot move on. And it was all about trying to like drag them back into the dirt through their confessions to sort of remind them that they are, well, in his eyes, bad people. They have done bad things, and that is all they will ever be. So yeah, I mean, like, I don't think he's not sympathetic in that some of the stuff he does. I think,
No.
to do a bit of a Watchmen quote without condoning or condemning, I understand why he does what he does, but I would probably not go the same way.
Did the police turn up? I mean, there was a bit of noise, and I know it was a quiet area, but there's a lot of gun shops over a long period of time. I would be surprised if he was allowed to just walk away at the end.
Yeah, I mean, there were versions where we did put more of a cap on it with police turning up and things like that.
Yeah,
I mean, it was obviously, we're in the UK, guns are not freely available, and that is something
yeah,
we had to kind of consider while making it, in that, you're not going to go in full of clips. The bullets in the gun are
no,
the bullets in the gun. And there was an element of that we knew that he shoots the gun once at the beginning, which you could probably, if you were in areas of London, be like, distant, loud banging noise. Okay. So we needed to be quite sparing with that to not
mm,
draw the kind of attention. I mean, really, we were shooting in a more or less residential area, but in the film, it's supposedly more kind of out of the way, more dilapidated. than
Okay.
you would imagine otherwise. But we did have versions where police turned up and all sorts of things happening. And that was ultimately
I was
also
expecting the red light outside or something, the blue light.
red lights cost money, Shane. We didn't have
Yes,
didn't
I
have
can
money for red
imagine.
lights.
Shadows and mirrors. You could have done a director's cameo as a police sergeant or something. You
I'm
never
not in.
know.
I mean, I am horrendously camera shy, and the last thing I need is for me to pop up. And also, I can tell you something. I'd like to think I can recognize a good performance, but I really cannot give one. So that was off the table from the
All right.
get-go. I've tried them
Well, both.
before, and I spoil it.
Well, I mean, nothing will spoil from Angelina and Jennifer Aries. I think that's how you say her last name. That those two,
Yeah,
there wasn't enough female. There was more male sort of energy in the room, and I think their cross-cutting of female perseverance and their different traits worked, because there seemed to be a lot of male arguing and yelling and you know how it goes when
yeah, of
guys get
course, of course.
together. Okay, so I know I've got to go soon. I know my time is limited, but I do want to mention two quick things. The music was sparse, but I thought really effective. I don't know, maybe a little bit more I thought was coming, but it wasn't. It was sort of more of a lower level. And also the handheld, some of the handheld camera work was effective too, which I'm a fan of handheld camera work. So congratulations on those two being.
Thank you
You
very
said
much.
keep saying it's an
Well,
indie film, but you did well.
well, thank you. I mean, I can say that Dennis Tajik, the composer, who was wonderful, came on in post and did the music for us. The music is available on Apple Music, Spotify. I even make a habit of tagging it in the Instagram posts on
Okay.
the group Instagram. And yeah, like we had a really good camera crew. My DOP Andy was absolutely fantastic. Lit the entire set on his own at points with a big bit of polystyrene that would sit over the group, and all the light was sort of bounced up and down to give us that freedom. And with the handheld, we knew to use it sparingly because we know that it's the death of many an independent film when it's just not done particularly well. So we tried to keep things
True.
as we did our little rule, which was that for everything outside of the group, then when we go in with the camera for when Jack does his big speech, we're in the circle then. And the idea was to stay at least within the circle, except when Jack ventured out, because ultimately he's the only person that can move. It was a big challenge for the crew in that he is the only person that could move, and in some ways is dragging that camera around the circle. And it took a lot
Yeah.
of effort from Dylan to nail the blocking on that.
Well, I can't believe people still do Zumba. That's a shock to me as well. I thought that was long gone.
I mean,
Uh,
I don't think I could ever look at Zumba the same way. I don't think.
Maybe it's a UK thing. Finally, what's coming up next? Anything that you can highlight or tell me about what to look out for that you're directing or writing?
We've got a little project in the work, me and the producer, which hopefully I'll be able to reveal more of soon. We're just finishing up a second draft and talking with our distributors, who seem quite pleased with the way everything's been going with the group. So fingers crossed, it won't be too long before I pop up again on another podcast
Okay.
with you, Shane.
Did you have an alternative title to the group?
It was always the group, but I think a few
Okay.
people have tried. There were a few more were suggested. I can't remember. I remember the original distributor was trying to change the name quite a few times, but I quite like the simplicity of the group, despite the fact it
Yeah.
now turns out it's a Sidney Lumet film, which does cause some confusion. But I think you'd be well gutted if you thought you were getting Sidney Lumet and you got our film instead.
Look, one of my bugbears and pet hates is when movies are called the same name. But if there's enough years in between those titles, you can get away with it. So it's all good.
Thank you very much. The Shane approval, seal of approval on the name there.
Thank you very much for your time, Will. I appreciate. Good luck. I hope it does very well.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Cool.